Hi, this is Daria, and this video is about practicing. Someone has asked me to make a video about organizing a practice routine, but before I can do that one, this one is essential because this one will cover the three most important points that you need to understand about practicing. First being, what does practice really mean? What is it, that magical act that happens that make us perform better after we do it? A second thing is how to set an effective and achievable goal for yourself for each practice. Not just for the session, but during the practice, for each repetition that happens, you need to have this micro or immediate, I call it, goal. And the third thing is how to set reasonable expectations of yourself at the end of the practice session. What to expect after you've practiced for an hour. Because based on that, we can feel good or bad or fantastic or awful after the practice, right? So these are very important things to consider and to understand. They're very basic, and for some of you it's intuitive what I'm going to say. So I apologize if it's boring and you want to skip that and wait for the next video. No offense here, absolutely. But I think it's very important to understand that. All right, so I have my cheat sheet here. I'll try to make as few cuts as possible because I don't like editing so much. Okay, that's why it takes me so long for the videos. I'm sorry. All right, so the first thing, when someone says, I'm gonna go practice, and you're not a musician, you probably imagine something like, I might be wrong, but that's what I would imagine, is like this little child sitting in that dark room for hours and practicing this one passage over and over and over, and there is maybe a teacher sitting next to him, beating him up for every wrong note. And at the end, somehow he plays better after the 2 hours, right? That's not the most effective way. There are better ways to do it, and there are more common than the way I've just described, which is also possible, but it's sad. Practicing, what it really means, the first and foremost, are three aspects. First is you need to have a macro goal of what you want to hear from yourself playing. You need to have a very clear idea of what kind of music you want to produce in very much detail, everything you have to imagine. After you have that clear image, sound image in your head, you play. And when you play and it doesn't match, you say, okay, that's bad. I don't like this. And you're probably thinking, okay, let me now repeat it again and it's gonna get better. Well, unfortunately, if you're just gonna repeat it, most likely you're gonna repeat it the same way. And if you keep doing the same thing over and you get the same result a few times in a row, do you think you're going to do that again is going to change? The result probably is not going to change. So what you need to do, the second step you need to take after you realize that what you hear you do is not what you want to hear you do, is to understand where is the weakest spot. Where is that mistake or that spot that makes you not make the sound you want. Once you identify that weakness, you need to think of how to fix that, how to get that to the level that you want it to be. Find a possible solution. You identify the issue and you find a possible solution. Solution A. Then you're going to repeat again that same segment, small segment. You're not going to repeat the entire piece if you've been playing 2 pages and suddenly at the end of the second page you made a mistake. You're not going to go back to the beginning. Just saying. You're going to isolate that. I'm not sure how. Usually it has to be a complete phrase or a complete measure at least, and see where the mistake was, so that you found that little tiny mistake spot with a magnifying glass, or if you isolate the small segment. Now, you're going to try to implement that solution that you just came up with and see what's going to happen. Okay, I'm going to do this Bach's piece for you, just that spot that I'm unhappy with, let's say. Alright, so that's enough. So let's say that didn't match what I imagined. I didn't match what I wanted. What particularly was the worst that didn't match is the sound wasn't even. I wanted the line to be and it was a little too much up and down in volume. Why is that? Perhaps, well, also I felt my hand was uncomfortable. First thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to try to change fingering. That's my possible solution. What if I change the uncomfortable fingering to a more comfortable fingering that will create a smoother transition between notes, which would lead to a smoother line? Okay, so let's try. Instead of this, I'm going to now do it with one. Did that help? It helped my hand to play with ease. But now I hear a lot of thumb. I identified that that's the problem. Now that's making it uneven. Let me fix that spot particularly. I'm gonna take my magnifying glass and take that segment and make it smaller. So I focus only on the issue at hand, which is thumb. That's my immediate goal. I'm going to fix the way thumb touches the key so that it becomes evenly connected with the previous and the next note. With 5, okay. 1, 3, 1, 5. 1, 3, 1, 5, 1, 3, 1. I think I found the solution. When I control the way thumb works, and with this type of fingering, it sounds how I want it. It matches. Yes, that's great. You did the step number 2. You identified and you found a solution that works. Now, step number 3, you need to make sure that you are able to replicate that solution over and over again. Meaning, you remember how to fix it, right? So it becomes your second nature. Oh, the car, sorry. Now, how to do that? My solution is the rule of 3. The first time I found it. The second time I'm going to repeat it again the same way to make sure it wasn't an accident what happened just now before. And the third time in order to ensure that I know exactly how to reproduce that result again. So let's say I'm going to do it again. That wasn't 3 times, by the way. That was 1 time because that pattern is repeated 3 times in the piece. So number 3, I'm going to do it again and check if I can do it. Okay, now the thumb wasn't as good, so I'm going to try again. Again. And again. More or less. If I'm being hard on myself, I'll do that 3 more times. Now, I am sure that this is fixed. Now I'm going to go back to the bigger picture and put it together with 2 hands. Okay, now I think that it doesn't exactly match what I wanted because now my left hand is a bit too mellow. I want it to be... I want more separation of those notes, okay. And this is the part I'm worried about. I think I found the way to fix it. Just more articulation and just think about it. I'll focus on it more. Sometimes all it takes to fix is just your focus on that particular element. Maybe that's the only solution you need. Okay? Now, I'm going to try to combine what I've just did with the thumb, thinking about that, plus this. It's not too bad. Well, let's say if it didn't turn out so well and I did... What happens now? Okay, that doesn't match because my thumb now is following the left hand and it's also trying to do this, but it needs to hide. So multitasking is what you need to be really good at when you practice or playing an instrument, because you've just fixed one thing that didn't match what you wanted, and then it's good, but you found a different thing that doesn't match what you wanted. You fixed that, but them together is difficult. Because for you to get really used to something that you've just accomplished and to make it your second nature, it takes more time. It takes to sleep on it. Our brain needs to remember. The muscle memory and how quick it is for each person individually, it also will determine the way your practice will progress. So don't be hard on yourself if that's not your strongest point, so your muscle memory is a little slower. That's okay. But what you can do is, what you should do is to focus mentally on those two tasks. Be very clear on what you're going to focus on now. This plus this. Now I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to focus on my thumb in the right hand and the left hand being articulate. Here we go. Okay, that worked. Did it get me where I wanted? At this point, yes. Maybe for the moment, I'm happy. There was something else I would like to fix, but I can do that tomorrow, so I move on. So you don't get stuck on this one little element, and to make it perfect, it can take you weeks. You will not move on. You need to understand that this is the time to leave it and move on. For the time being, you're happy with your progress. So just to summarize what practice is, the first thing is you need to have a very clear goal in mind how you want a particular spot or whole piece to sound. Second, when you play and you identify that it doesn't match with what you want, what you play is not the same as what you hear, identify what the weak point is. Where's the mistake that you want to fix? It could be multiple. You could analyze and think one at a time, and then once you fix that, the next one comes, like I explained before. You try to come up with a possible solution, meaning you're not going to repeat this again the same exact way as you did before, hoping that something's going to change towards the desired outcome. It doesn't work like that. You need to really have your immediate goal in mind. After you did that, you compare. If you found a solution that works, then you take step number 3. You're going to repeat that at least 2 more times. The first time to make sure it wasn't an accident, and the second time to make sure you can reproduce it anytime you need, and you know exactly what it takes to do it. Here's another thing. It does involve a multitude of repetitions, but the amount of that multitude will really depend in stage 2. It will depend on, meaning finding a solution and making sure that solution works. That will depend on the way you focus when you play. That depends on the way how well you know your own weaknesses perhaps, or how well you are familiar with the different ways of approaching the same type of passage or something. You know that there are alternative ways of playing what you're playing. May include different fingering, may include different dynamic, may include different approach with your hand and everything, like a lot of different things. So you need to be versed in how to approach it differently, right? So if something you're doing doesn't work, you need to have an alternative, and you need to be familiar with alternatives. So that's step number 2. That period might be more repetitions for one person and less repetitions for another, depending on that experience. Okay, so we have discussed those immediate micro goals, and now we're going to talk about the big picture, the macro goal, and the medium goals for daily practice, and how to set them adequately. So the big goal, your big picture, is always going to be a guiding star, and that is your end result, your oral image that you created in your head, in your ears, of that piece that you want to perform, or a particular segment of the piece. If you don't have a clear idea of the whole piece yet, at least for that fragment you're practicing, that should always be somewhere in the back of your head, because that's your guide. Without that picture, you will have no destination to go, right? That's very, very important. When I was young, I used to do painting, and I would always be surprised or a little frustrated by how my picture turned out. Like, well, it's not exactly what I wanted. And now I understand why, because I didn't really have a very clear image in front of me when I started painting. I kind of sort of had this vague idea overall, but then it never turned out the same exact way. So you need to have a very clear idea with as many details as you can provide for yourself. That's a little bit from what I said before. Now, a second important thing, general, about goals is pace yourself adequately based on your previous training and experience. You can't expect yourself to go at a very fast pace if you haven't been practicing for the past couple of years. Be patient with yourself. And it's better to set a smaller goal and then exceed it. That's just psychology, right? So then to set too much of a goal and then be upset that you didn't get there, right? Didn't reach it. If you feel like you have set too high of a goal, don't be scared, just adjust it and don't beat yourself up about it. We're all learning. It's very important to know yourself very well in order to structure your practice correctly. Now, after the general stuff, what kind of goals for the day or for the practice session can you have? There's a list here I have. I'm going to read a little bit. So the easiest ones, the first one that comes to mind is the goal of increasing speed of a certain passage of a whole piece, for example. For example, you need to get from metronome 90 to metronome 120, right? And if you expect yourself to do that in one day, if it's a very difficult piece and you're barely doing 90, well, you can sit there for 10 hours and you won't be able to do it. I'm sorry, that's impossible, okay? So maybe there's like 1% chance, but don't take that chance. Be reasonable with yourself. Let's say you're going to increase by 4 metronome markings per day. And then you get there in like 8 days or something, about a week or something like that, right? And if at some point you feel like you could do 8 metronome markings, not 4, just try and do it. Some days you'll be stuck. Here, the thing about the speed goals can be tricky. For example, when I was practicing one of the Chopin etudes, I got stuck at the certain metronome markings for like 3 weeks. I couldn't go past it. There was something that needed to be adjusted in the way I was playing in order to propel me further. And when that happened, I had no problem exceeding that over and over, that speed again. So you have to be patient and a little bit at a time. Second type of goal could be coordination between two hands, how to put two hands together. That can be achieved as short as in 1 session, could take 2 sessions, depending on how your coordination is. It's more tangible. It's pretty clear on what to do. Again, cutting into smaller segments is good. Like just 1 measure, or even half of a measure, even like 2 notes together, this type of coordination, right? So only these 2 notes together. So I need to go these 2 notes, like. A third type of goal could be polishing a passage, a technical passage, where you want it to be a certain way, and it's kind of almost there, but you want to improve either speed or lightness of it, or the nuance. You want a different dynamic, you want it to be quieter, or you want it to do a crescendo, or you want it to be more powerful, something like this. Polishing technical passages requires most likely everyday work, so that's just little things from the next video. I'm just going to mention a tiny bit briefly. So if something is very technical, it will require most likely everyday practice in order to achieve and sustain your result. Number 4, working on the sound. Meaning, for example, in a slow movement of a sonata, or in some Debussy piece, or in some Chopin, you want a particular quality in your sound, some tenderness, or you want it to sound like someone is crying, or you want it to sound more powerful and forceful. That is a particular type of work that can be achieved in 1 practice session, but that requires more of your emotional involvement and of your kind of cognitive understanding on how to transmit from here to here. Number 5 could be a goal working on nuances. Let's say you want to improve on articulation, you want staccato to be sharper, or legato to be smoother maybe, or an accent to be more determined, or a better transition. So on this point about nuances, I can actually give you a quick example on the Mozart, because nuances I take really seriously and I like practicing them a lot, so that's something easy for me to show. So here. So for example, now, I wasn't happy with 2 things. That didn't sound what last didn't sound, and then I missed a little bit here. So what I want to achieve here is I want to work on articulation more staccato, which is sharper and more kind of aggressive attack. And I want more contrast. I want it to be really gentle and really beautiful piano. So that's something I'm going to work on. Number 6, you could have a goal of working on the pedal, and usually that involves practicing the left hand together with the pedal, because left hand is most likely responsible for the bass note, and the bass note we want to include in the pedal, usually. Again, it does depend on what kind of music you play, but so that could be your goal. You were saying, okay, today I'm going to make sure that I know when I'm pressing the pedal, when I'm releasing the pedal, if it's clean, if it's exactly the notes I want to sound together, and how comfortable am I when changing it and playing to one hand and then 2 hands together and so on. Or maybe for the particular line, or maybe not for the whole piece. Or maybe for the whole piece. Another type of goal, artistic goal. That's the most kind of difficult one to achieve and not always very tangible, but usually it's a gut feeling whether you think you got it or not. It's your own judge. That's why it's nice to have practice recordings where you hear yourself back and you try to get a more objective idea. Did I deliver the message I wanted or not? So an artistic goal basically comes to transmitting a certain emotion or creating a persuasive and musical narrative that will be transmitted to the audience. So that you first kind of need to understand what the composer is saying here, or his intentions. Then you process it through yourself in the way that you understand. And once you think you have a clear understanding of the composer's intentions, you produce that interpretation that you present to the audience. And the not validity, but I would say the power of that interpretation is tested during the performance. This is why the practice performances, that even the imperfect ones that I record, they're extremely helpful, and I suggest you do the same. Record yourself. You don't have to post it on YouTube, or don't have to show it to anyone. You just do it for yourself and you hear back what is really coming out. Because when we play, it's very difficult to learn the skill to hear yourself as a third person. We're usually so absorbed in it that it's hard for us to distance ourselves and try to kind of look from a helicopter perspective in a way. So that's an artistic goal. And another goal could be maybe slow practice to clean something that, for example, if I've been playing this fast piece for a long time and I feel like my fingers are more working mechanically and I can no longer control them, and I feel that if I do it a couple more times I will lose control and they will just fall apart. This is where it's good to take a step back and practice very slowly. Everything. Maybe just come from the beginning to the end slowly, without stops. You can do practicing separate hands. Maybe today I'm only working on the left hand in this piece. Anything that has to do with the left hand is your goal. There are probably many more like that, but these are just a few examples of what goals can be for a particular practice session, for a particular piece. You can have a practice session of 1 hour where you have 2 pieces you're working on, and this one type of goal for one piece and another type of goal, or it could be 2 goals per piece and things like that. So pace yourself adequately depending on how much time you're planning to spend on each piece. And the last thing I would like to mention about those medium goals for each practice session is best is to create your mental list of goals for the practice session, or it could be writing them out, that whatever works for you, but immediately before the practice starts. Take a minute or two to assess the state of being you're in, and based on that adjust your pre-made, let's say, practice routine that you've had envisioned for like a week or something, or their regular routine. Because certain things, of course, you will have to have a structured routine and with essential elements that are consistent from one day to the next, but you have to have room for adjustment. For what? Adjustment for your, like I said, state of being. You have to be very aware of we are as human beings, we get affected by a lot of things, and depending on a day and how the day went and what time of the day you're practicing and all those little variables you have to account for. For example, how can that affect your practice? You might be in the mood for particularly beautiful middle section, slow, and working on the sound right now. So you're going to do that. On that particular piece, you're going to focus most attention on that because you connect with it, because that's your aura right now. That's your state. Or you could be very energized and you want to work on this introduction that is rigorous and fast and is like full of energy. That's your state of being, and you have to connect to that. Or maybe you're super tired, you're coming from work and thinking, okay, I really need to crank in this 1 hour of practice. What can I do? Actually, the easiest thing to crank in if you were tired is technical practice. So that would be a good day to, push yourself to the limit and just practice the technical thing where you just need to work your fingers. And that you might be because you're angry or because you're so tired, you might actually, that might be the right time to push your limit, and you will get to the next level because of that state you're in. And for example, I would never practice a slow, beautiful movement of a Chopin or Mozart or anything if I don't feel like it. I'm not, unless I really have to learn this piece quickly. I would wait till I am in that right mood to make the most of it, because the intensity of the emotional intense connection is helping you to achieve your goal, to achieve your result. And if you're lacking that, then it's going to be tricky. It's going to be more difficult. The third part of this video is going to be about market. I'm just kidding. Okay, and the last part of this video is about how to set reasonable expectations of yourself for each practice session and what to expect at the end of the session or at the end of the weekly sessions and things like that. So